I need to get this off my chest because I've been carrying this rage for 3 months now and it's eating me alive. Not in a bad way, though. More like fuel. Pure, concentrated fuel that's been powering every single decision I've made since October. I'm 41, been married to Molly for 8 years. She came with 2 kids from her previous marriage, Ralph, who's 23 now, and Hannah, who's 21. Their real dad, Harold, is very much in the picture, sees them every other weekend, takes them out for dinners, the whole deal. I knew what I was signing up for when I married Molly. Blended family, complicated dynamics, all that stuff everyone warns you about. Here's what nobody warned me about, though. Nobody told me I'd spend 8 years busting my back working double shifts as a logistics coordinator, paying for everything from their car insurance to Ralph's entire 4 years at State University to Hannah's sorority fees, only to find out they've been laughing at me behind my back the entire time. Let me back up. Our house is old, built in the 1950s, and it's got this quirky heating system with vents that connect rooms in weird ways. I inherited it from my uncle when he died 10 years ago, before I even met Molly. The house is 100% in my name, something that's going to be very relevant later. There's this one vent in my home office that connects to the living room, and normally you can't hear much through it because of how the angles work. But if people are sitting in a specific spot on the couch and talking at a certain volume, it comes through crystal clear. I was working late on a Thursday night in October, around 11 p.m. I had a massive shipment manifest to finish before morning, and I was hunched over my desk with my headphones off because they were giving me a headache. That's when I heard Hannah's voice through the vent, loud and clear, followed by Ralph's laugh. Then I heard Molly. Then I heard Karen, Molly's mother, who'd been staying with us for the past month because she'd sold her condo and was supposedly looking for a new place. At first I wasn't paying attention, just background noise while I worked. But then I heard my name, not said nicely, said with this tone that made me stop typing and actually listen. Hannah was talking about how I'd asked her about her biology exam that morning. Apparently that was hilarious, because I'd pronounced something wrong and she'd corrected me. She was telling this story like it was the funniest thing in the world, mimicking my voice, making me sound like some dumb hick who couldn't understand basic science. Ralph jumped in and said something about how I always try to sound smart when I talk about their college stuff, but I just embarrass myself because I never went to college myself. Just 2 years of community college before I started working full-time, which I've never hidden from anyone. I sat there, frozen. Not because of the mocking itself, people make fun of each other, whatever, but because of the viciousness in their voices, the genuine contempt, like they truly thought I was beneath them. Then it got worse. So much worse. Molly laughed and said something about how I'd worked a double shift last week to cover the cost of Hannah's spring formal dress. Worked 16 hours on a Friday to make sure she had the $400 she needed for the dress she absolutely had to have. Molly said it was pathetic how eager I was to hand over money, how I practically trip over myself trying to prove I'm a good stepdad. She said it's been the easiest 8 years of her life because I'm too desperate for their approval to ever say no. I'm going to be real with you all right now. I did not have some big emotional breakdown at that moment. I didn't feel hurt or betrayed in the way you'd expect. I felt clarity, like someone had just turned on every light in a dark house and I could finally see what had been there all along. Karen started talking. Karen, who I'd been letting live in my house rent-free for 5 weeks at that point. Karen, who I'd been driving to her doctor's appointments because her license was suspended for unpaid tickets. She said that I was the perfect mark, that when Molly met me, I was some lonely guy so desperate for a family that I'd believe anything. She said Molly had played me perfectly from day one. That exact phrase, played me. Then Ralph said something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. He said Harold, their real dad, thinks the whole situation is hilarious. That they all have this group chat with Harold where they share screenshots of my text to the kids. That they make fun of how I sign my texts with love you and how I always ask about their day. Ralph said I reminded him of those videos of dogs who get so excited when their owner comes home, just desperate for any scrap of attention. Hannah's contribution was even better. She told this story about last year when Ralph graduated college. I'd worked overtime for 3 months straight to help cover his final semester because Harold could only pay half and Molly's income wasn't enough. The day of graduation, I'd gotten emotional, actual tears in my eyes, because I was proud of him. Proud. Like he was my own son. Hannah said I'd hugged Ralph and told him I was proud to be his stepdad, and Ralph had to stop himself from laughing in my face. She said after the ceremony, when I went to get the car, Ralph and Harold had laughed about it. Laughed. There was more. Another 20 minutes of it. Stories about how I'd taken them on a vacation to the beach 3 summers ago and paid for everything while Harold got to be the fun dad who just showed up for the good parts. How I'd helped Hannah move into her dorm freshman year, carried all her boxes up 3 flights of stairs in August heat, and she'd told her friends I was like an overexcited puppy who needed something to do. How they all called me the ATM when I wasn't around. Not stepdad, not even my name. The ATM. The thing about hearing all this through a vent is that they had no idea I was listening. No performance, no sugarcoating, no pretending. This was their real opinion of me. 8 years of what I thought was building a family, and this was the truth underneath it all. I sat in my office until 3 a.m. that night. Didn't confront them. Didn't storm into the living room. Didn't make a sound. Just sat there and made a list. A very detailed, very specific list of exactly what I'd been paying for over the past 8 years. Every tuition payment, every insurance bill, every vacation, every emergency car repair for Molly's SUV that I'd covered because we're family, and that's what you do for family. Every single dollar. Then I made a second list. This one was about what I owned versus what they owned. The house, mine. The car in the driveway, mine. The furniture, mine. Most of it I'd owned before the marriage or bought myself after. Molly had moved in with her clothes and her kids, and that was about it. She made decent money as an office manager, but she spent it on herself. I paid the mortgage, utilities, property taxes, insurance. I paid for everything that mattered. The third list was about legal realities. We'd married without a prenup because I was an idiot who believed in love and trust and all that garbage. But the house being in my name from before the marriage meant something. It meant something big. I spent the next 4 hours reading every article I could find about property rights and divorce and tenant law. Did you know that in my state, a spouse has certain claims to marital assets but not to property that was owned before the marriage and kept separately? Did you know that adult children living in your house have almost no tenant protections if they're not paying rent and not on any lease? I learned a lot that night. Friday morning, I got up, showered, and made breakfast like normal. Eggs and toast for everyone. Molly came down first and kissed me on the cheek, asked if I'd finished my work stuff. I said yes. She said she was proud of me for working so hard. I smiled and said thanks. Ralph came down 20 minutes later, asked if I could spot him $60 for gas and going out with friends that weekend. I said sure, no problem. Transferred it to him right there. He said thanks, stepdad. You're the best. I said anytime, buddy. Hannah appeared around 9 a.m. She'd stayed home from her Friday classes because she had a cold. Asked if I could pick up her prescription on my way home from work because she didn't feel like driving. I said, absolutely, sweetie. Text me the details. She hugged me and said I was the best stepdad anyone could ask for. Karen didn't come down until almost 11, but when she did, she mentioned she needed new walking shoes and could I take her to the mall tomorrow. I said I'd be happy to. Every single word out of their mouths was a lie. Every hug was fake. Every thank you was performance. And now I knew it. I went to work like normal, but during my lunch break I drove to a lawyer's office. Consultation about divorce and property rights. The lawyer was very interested in my situation, especially the part about the house and the part about me having a recording app on my phone. See, after that Thursday night, I'd gone back to my office and I'd recorded a full 40 minutes of them talking through the vent. Friday night, I did it again. Got another hour. All of them sitting in the living room of my house talking about what a pathetic ATM I was. The lawyer said this was very useful information. He said a lot of things, actually, most of which made me smile for the first time in 24 hours. Over the next 3 weeks, I kept playing the perfect stepdad. Molly wanted to go out for our anniversary. I planned a whole dinner. Cost me $200. Ralph needed help with his resume. I spent 2 hours editing it. Hannah wanted advice about some friend drama. I listened for 45 minutes and gave her my thoughts. Karen needed rides to 3 different appointments. I drove her every time. And every night I listened through the vent, heard them laugh about all of it, heard Molly tell Karen that our anniversary dinner was nice, but she wished she'd married someone with more ambition. Heard Ralph tell Hannah that my resume advice was garbage, but he pretended it helped because it made me feel useful. Heard Hannah say she couldn't wait to graduate so she wouldn't have to fake being grateful anymore. But here's my favorite part. 2 weeks after I'd first heard them, Harold came over. He doesn't usually come to the house, but he was picking the kids up for the weekend and came inside while they finished packing. I was in my office, door closed, supposedly on a work call. I could hear him through the vent too. He asked Molly if I was still clueless. She said completely. He asked if she thought I'd ever figure it out. She said no way. I was too dumb and too desperate. Then he said something that made my blood go from hot to ice cold. He said once Hannah graduated in 2 years, Molly should divorce me and take me for everything she could get. Said her lawyer friend had told her she could claim half the house value, even though my name was on it. Said they just had to wait until Hannah was done with college, so I couldn't stop paying for it out of spite. They had a plan. This whole thing was a plan. Keep me working and paying, and being the good little stepdad until they'd squeezed every last dollar out of me. Then dump me and try to take the house too. That's when something shifted in me completely. This wasn't about hurt feelings anymore. This was about 8 years of my life that I'd given to people who saw me as nothing but a wallet with legs. This was about every double shift I'd worked, every birthday present I'd bought, every time I'd chosen their needs over my own because I thought that's what family meant. I'd been planning to maybe talk to Molly, maybe try to fix things. But after hearing that, after hearing about their exit strategy that involved taking my house, I made a different decision. I was going to burn it all down. Update 1. Okay, so I wasn't expecting this post to blow up like it did. Thanks for all the support and also thanks to the people calling me an idiot for not seeing this sooner. You're right, I was an idiot. But I'm a motivated idiot now, so buckle up because this gets good. Where I left off, I just heard Harold and Molly discussing their exit plan where they wait for Hannah to graduate, then divorce me, and try to take half my house. Yeah, that house I inherited from my uncle and owned for 2 years before I even met Molly. The house that's 100% in my name with zero of her money ever going into the mortgage or renovations. But apparently, her lawyer friend said she had a case. Cool, cool, cool. So let me tell you what I've been doing for the past month while maintaining my perfect stepdad routine. First thing, I met with my lawyer 3 more times. His name is Marcus, and he's exactly the kind of ruthless I needed. I played him the recordings from the vent. All of them. He sat there listening to my wife and her kids talk about what a pathetic ATM I am. And when it was done, he looked at me and said this was the most clear-cut case he'd seen in years. See, in my state, recorded conversations in your own home are admissible if you're one of the parties, or if you have a reasonable expectation that you might be discussed. Since they were literally talking about me and my money and my house, I had every right to record it. Marcus laid out the divorce strategy. We filed papers 2 weeks ago. Molly doesn't know yet because Marcus is having her served at her office this Friday. Why her office? Because I'm petty, and I want her coworkers to see it. She's always been so proud of her professional image, always talking about how respected she is at work. Well, now everyone in that office is going to watch her get served divorce papers and they're going to wonder why. But the divorce is just part 1. Part 2 is where it gets really fun. The house. Ralph and Hannah are both legal adults living in my house without a lease, without paying rent, and without any tenant protections because they're not tenants. They're family members who I've been supporting out of the goodness of my wallet. Marcus explained that I can ask them to leave with reasonable notice. In my state, that's 30 days for people who aren't on a lease. So I had him draft eviction notices for Ralph and Hannah. They're getting served the same day Molly gets the divorce papers. All 3 of them, same day, everything hits at once. Karen's notice is separate because she's in a slightly different category. She's been staying here more than 30 days, so technically she has some squatter's rights. But since she's not paying rent and there's no written agreement, I can still evict her. Her notice gives her 60 days instead of 30 because of state law about guests who've been living somewhere over a month. But 60 days is still 60 days. She's out by March. Now here's where some of you might be thinking I'm being too harsh. Kicking out my wife's elderly mother, evicting my stepkids who I helped raise, destroying my marriage over something I overheard. And to those people I say, they plan to do worse to me. They were going to wait until they'd used me for every penny they could get, then divorce me and try to take my house. The house I inherited from my dead uncle who raised me after my parents died when I was 7. The only thing I have left of my actual family. They were going to try to take that. So no, I don't feel bad. I feel energized. While I was setting up the legal stuff, I also handled the financial separation. This is where it gets technical, but stay with me because it's important. Molly and I have a joint checking account that we use for household expenses. My paycheck goes into my personal account, her paycheck goes into her personal account, and we both transfer money into the joint account for bills, except I've been transferring way more than her for 8 years. I went back through our bank statements and did the math. I've contributed about $180,000 more to that joint account than she has over the course of our marriage. Marcus said that joint account is going to be split 50/50ths in the divorce no matter what, so I needed to think strategically about it. Right now, there's about $8,000 in there. Half of that is legally hers, even though I'm the one who put most of it there. But you know what? I can live with losing $4,000 if it means she loses everything else. 3 weeks ago, I stopped contributing to the joint account. Just stopped. My personal account keeps growing with my paychecks, but the joint account that pays the mortgage and utilities and everything else. That's all coming from Molly's contributions now. She hasn't noticed yet because she doesn't actually pay attention to money stuff. I always handled all of that. She just assumes the bills are getting paid like they always do. They're not, though. The mortgage payment bounced last week. I got the notice and I just filed it away. The electric bill is overdue. The internet bill is past due. I'm letting it all pile up in her name because I'm not paying for anything anymore. When she gets served with divorce papers on Friday, she's also going to discover that she's now solely responsible for a joint account that doesn't have enough money to cover all the household bills. And since my name is on the mortgage, but she's been the one making the payments from that account lately, the missed payment hits both of us, but I can prove it was her contribution that failed. Is this petty? Yes. Do I care? Not even a little bit. Ralph's car insurance is up for renewal next week. I've been paying it for 4 years, every 6 months, $1,200 a shot. Guess who's not renewing it this time? He's going to get a notice that his insurance lapsed, and he's going to come ask me about it, and I'm going to smile and tell him there must have been some mistake. He should call the insurance company. And when he does, they're going to tell him that the policy wasn't renewed because payment wasn't received. And he's going to have to figure out how to get insurance on his own with his part-time retail job money. Hannah's sorority dues are due February 15th, $800. I paid them last semester and the semester before that. She hasn't asked me about them yet because she assumes I'll just handle it like I always do. I'm not handling it. She's going to get kicked out of her sorority for non-payment. And it's going to be humiliating for her because all her friends are going to know she couldn't afford the dues. Some of you are probably thinking I should have confronted them first. Had a conversation. Tried to work it out. And you know what? You're wrong. These people spent 8 years lying to my face every single day. They had group chats with Harold where they mocked me. They made fun of me for being emotional at Ralph's graduation. They called me an ATM behind my back and planned to divorce me and take my house. You don't sit down and have a conversation with people like that. You don't give them a chance to manipulate you or gaslight you or make you feel like you're overreacting. You execute. But here's where things got complicated last week, and this is the new development I need to tell you about because it's throwing my timeline off a little bit. Karen fell. She's 68, and she's got bad knees, and last Tuesday she fell down the 3 steps from the deck to the backyard. Twisted her ankle pretty badly. Not broken, but badly sprained. She couldn't drive, and she needed help getting around, and guess who she expected to take care of her? Me, the ATM. The fool who thinks he's part of the family. Molly asked if I could work from home a few days to help her mom since Molly couldn't take time off work. And here's the thing. I could have said no. Should have said no. But I said yes because I'm still playing the role. Still being the good stepdad and good son-in-law right up until the moment I detonate everything. So I've been helping Karen get around. Bringing her ice packs. Driving her to the follow-up appointment with her doctor. And the whole time she's thanking me and telling me I'm such a good man and she's so glad Molly found someone like me. The irony is actually physically painful, but here's what Karen doesn't know. While I was helping her on Wednesday, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She'd asked me to bring it to her, and I picked it up and saw she had a text notification from Harold. And the preview said something like, "Told the kids we should take him for more before the divorce. He's got more savings than Molly realizes." I didn't open the phone. Didn't need to. That one text preview told me everything. They're actively planning to increase what they take from me before they even file for divorce. They're not just planning to wait until Hannah graduates. They're actively strategizing about how to maximize what they can get. So I took a picture of her phone screen showing that text preview with my phone, added it to my evidence folder, brought her the phone like nothing happened. And I've been thinking about that text for 4 days straight. They want to take me for more. They think I have savings they don't know about. And the wildest part is they're right. I have about $85,000 in savings and investments that Molly has no idea about because I opened those accounts before we got married and kept them separate. Marcus says that money is protected in the divorce as premarital assets. But they don't know that. They think they can go after all of it. The level of entitlement is insane. Yesterday, Hannah came home from college for the weekend. She's got Monday off for some reason, so she decided to visit. She came into my office while I was working and asked if we could talk. And I'm thinking, okay, this is it. Maybe she somehow figured out I know something. But no, she wanted to ask if I could co-sign a loan for her. A loan. For $5,000. Because she wants to do a summer study abroad program in Spain, and she needs the money up front. She gave me this whole speech about how it would be such an amazing opportunity and how she'd pay me back as soon as she got a job after graduation. And she did this thing she's done since she was a teenager, where she calls me dad instead of my name because she knows it gets to me. She sat there calling me dad and asking me to co-sign a loan. And I'm sitting there knowing that in less than a week she's getting eviction papers, and in 3 months I'll be divorced from her mother. I told her I needed to think about it, that I'd have an answer for her next week. She hugged me and said, "Take your time, Dad. no pressure, and left my office. And I sat there staring at my computer screen thinking about how good these people are at manipulation, how effortlessly Hannah can turn on the sweet daughter act when she wants something, how she's probably been practicing this in the mirror, figuring out exactly what to say to make me feel guilty enough to sign my name to a loan she has zero intention of paying back. The co-signing thing gave me an idea, though. I texted Marcus about it, asked if there was any way her asking me to take on more financial obligation for her could be relevant in the eviction case. He said it actually strengthens our position because it shows she views me as a financial resource, rather than a parent figure. It demonstrates the transactional nature of our relationship. His words, not mine. But they're accurate. Everything is falling into place for Friday. Molly gets served at work around 2 p.m. Ralph gets his eviction notice at the warehouse where he works part-time, also around 2 p.m. Hannah gets hers delivered to her dorm by process server around the same time. Karen gets hers hand-delivered at the house by a different process server. All coordinated, all simultaneous, all perfectly timed so they can't warn each other before it happens. And me? I'm taking Friday off work. Told my boss I needed a personal day. I'm going to be sitting in my office with the door closed, listening through that vent, waiting to hear what happens when they all get home and compare notes about their terrible day, because they're all going to come home. That's what they do when something goes wrong. They all come running back to this house, to the ATM, expecting me to fix everything. Ralph's going to show up with his eviction notice asking what's going on. Hannah's going to drive home from college in a panic. Molly's going to storm in demanding to know what I think I'm doing. Karen's going to be confused and scared, and I'm going to be ready. I've got the divorce papers. I've got the recordings. I've got the text screenshot. I've got 8 years of financial records showing exactly how much I've contributed versus how much they've taken. I've got a lawyer who's as ruthless as they come. I've got my house in my name with no legal claim for any of them. What I don't have anymore is any illusion about who these people are. Friday is going to be a day. I'll update you all after the fallout because based on how entitled these people are, I'm expecting it to be spectacular. They think I'm the pathetic ATM who's too stupid to see the truth. They're about to find out exactly how much I've seen and exactly how long I've been planning this. To the commenter who said I should have confronted them first and given them a chance to apologize. With all due respect, that's naive as hell. You don't negotiate with people who've spent 8 years treating you like garbage behind your back while smiling to your face. You show them exactly what happens when they underestimate the ATM. 3 more days. I've waited 3 months for this since October. I can wait 3 more days. Update 2. Friday happened. And it was everything I hoped it would be, and also somehow worse than I could have imagined. Strap in because this is going to be long and messy, and I'm still processing half of it. I took the day off like I planned, woke up at my normal time, got ready like I was going to work, even got in my car and drove around the block a few times so if anyone was watching, they'd think I left. Then, I parked 3 streets over and walked back to the house through the backyard. Karen was still asleep because her ankle's been keeping her up at night and she sleeps late now. I went straight to my office, locked the door, and settled in to wait. The serving was scheduled to start at 2 p.m. Marcus had coordinated everything with 3 different process servers to make sure it all happened within the same 15-minute window. I sat in my office refreshing my phone every 30 seconds waiting for confirmation texts from Marcus. 2:14 p.m. Molly served at her office, confirmed. 2:16 p.m. Ralph served at the warehouse, confirmed. 2:19 p.m. Hannah served at her dorm, confirmed. 2:22 p.m. Karen served at the house. I heard that one. Heard the doorbell. Heard Karen shuffle to the door with her crutches. Heard her confused voice asking what this was about. Heard the process server explain he was delivering legal documents. Heard the door close. Then silence for about 5 minutes. Then I heard her on the phone. She called Molly first, started talking in this panicked voice about how someone just delivered papers saying she had to leave the house in 60 days, that it was an eviction notice, that she didn't understand what was happening. She kept saying my name over and over, asking if Molly knew where I was, if I knew about this. I could hear her getting more worked up, her voice getting louder and higher. Then I heard her call Ralph. Same thing, panic, confusion, asking if he knew what was going on. And that's when I realized Ralph hadn't looked at his papers yet because he told her he was at work and didn't know what she was talking about. She told him to check his mail or his doorstep or wherever process servers leave things at warehouses. There was this long pause, and then I heard her say, oh no, over and over. By 3 p.m., I could hear Karen crying in the living room, actually sobbing. And I'm not going to lie, that part was harder than I expected. Not because I felt bad about evicting her, but because I could hear how genuine her distress was, and it made me realize that she actually believed she was safe here. that she'd moved in thinking this was permanent, that she'd sold her condo and burned that bridge assuming she'd found a new home with her daughter and her daughter's stupid ATM husband. Ralph got home first, around 4:30 p.m. I heard the front door open and him calling for his grandmother. Heard him go to her in the living room. Heard him say he got papers too, that he had 30 days to move out, that this had to be some kind of mistake. Karen asked where I was, and Ralph said he'd been texting me but I wasn't responding, which was true. I'd silenced all their numbers that morning. Hannah showed up around 5:15 p.m. She'd driven straight from campus 2 hours, probably speeding the whole way. She came in yelling about how this was insane, how there was no way this was legal, how I couldn't just kick them out without warning. Ralph tried to explain that technically it was legal because they weren't on a lease and didn't pay rent, and Hannah snapped at him that he didn't know what he was talking about. Molly got home at 6 p.m. I know the exact time because I'd been watching the clock, waiting. I heard her car in the driveway, heard the car door slam, heard her storm into the house and immediately start demanding to know where I was. She was furious. Not scared, not upset, angry. She kept saying this was unacceptable, that I couldn't serve her at work, that it was humiliating, that her entire office saw, and now everyone knew her marriage was falling apart. Notice what she was mad about? Not that I was divorcing her, that I embarrassed her at work. Karen tried to talk to her about the eviction notices and Molly cut her off. Said they'd deal with that later. First, she needed to talk to me. She came down the hallway toward my office and tried the door. Locked. She knocked. I didn't answer. She knocked harder and said she knew I was in there, that my car was gone, but she could see the light under the door, that I needed to come out and explain what I thought I was doing. I opened the door. She was standing there in her work clothes, still in heels, holding the divorce papers in one hand and her phone in the other, and the look on her face was pure rage. She pushed past me into my office and spun around and asked what the hell this was. I closed the door behind her because I didn't need the kids and Karen hearing everything right away. I told her it was exactly what it looked like. A divorce, eviction notices, the end of her free ride. She did this laugh that wasn't really a laugh and said free ride, as if she hadn't been working full-time and contributing to this household for 8 years. And I just looked at her and said, contributing what exactly? Her paycheck that went to her personal spending while I paid the mortgage and utilities and property taxes and both kids' expenses for almost a decade? She said that wasn't fair, that we'd agreed she'd handle her own expenses and I'd handle the house because I made more money and it was my house anyway. And I said, right, exactly, my house, which is why she's getting zero claim to it in the divorce. She said her lawyer already told her she was entitled to half the equity because it was the marital home. I told her my lawyer said otherwise and we'd see what the judge said, but she should probably not count on getting anything. That's when she switched tactics. Went from angry to trying to be reasonable. Said we needed to talk about this like adults. That clearly I was upset about something and we could work through it. Asked if this was about money, if I felt unappreciated, if there was something specific that triggered this. And I'm standing there listening to her try to manipulate me in real time, and it's almost fascinating how good she is at it. I asked her if she wanted to know what triggered it. She said yes, of course she wanted to understand. So I told her. Told her about the vent in my office, told her I'd heard everything back in October. Every word, every joke, every plan. I told her I knew about the group chat with Harold where they mocked my texts, knew about their plan to divorce me after Hannah graduated, knew that Karen saw me as a mark from day one, knew that the kids called me the ATM. Her face went completely blank, just flat, and she asked how much I'd heard. I said enough. She asked if I'd recorded any of it. I didn't answer directly, but my expression must have told her something because she went white. She tried to say I was misunderstanding, that they were just venting, that everyone complains about their spouse sometimes, that it didn't mean anything. I asked her to explain the part about planning to take my house then, to explain Harold's text to Karen about taking me for more money before the divorce. She asked how I knew about that text, and I told her I saw it on Karen's phone when I was helping her after she fell. She called me a snoop, actually said that, said I had no right to look at her mother's phone. I pointed out that I didn't look at it. I saw a text preview when I was bringing it to her like Karen had asked me to. She said it was still an invasion of privacy. The irony of her accusing me of invading privacy after 8 years of lying to my face was almost funny. Then she said even if I had recordings, they wouldn't be admissible in court because you can't record people without their consent. I told her that actually, in this state, you can record conversations in your own home. If you have a reasonable expectation, you might be discussed. And since they were literally talking about me and my money, my lawyer was very confident the recordings would hold up. She went quiet for a minute, and then she asked what I wanted. What would it take for me to drop the divorce and the evictions? She said we could go to counseling, that she'd make the kids apologize, that they could all start contributing more financially. She said her mom would find her own place faster if that's what I wanted. She said Hannah could get a job instead of me co-signing that loan. She was listing all these offers like we were negotiating a business deal. And I realized something right then. She still didn't get it. She thought this was about money or respect or feeling appreciated. She thought if she just offered the right combination of things, she could fix it and keep her comfortable life. I told her there was nothing she could offer, that this was done, that she and her family had spent 8 years using me and I was finished. She said I was overreacting, that I was throwing away a marriage over some venting and some jokes. She said the kids did love me, that they were grateful, that maybe they didn't always show it, but that's just how young people are. She said I was being cruel to kick them out, that Ralph barely makes enough to afford rent anywhere. Hannah's still in school and her mother can't afford a place on her social security. I told her that wasn't my problem anymore, that for 8 years I'd made their problems my problems, and I was done. She said I was being vindictive and petty. I said she was right, and I didn't care. That's when we heard the front door open again and Harold's voice in the living room. Molly's face did this thing where she looked both relieved and worried at the same time. She left my office and I followed her out. Harold was standing in the living room with Ralph and Hannah and Karen, all clustered around him like he was going to fix everything. He's 47, works in sales, drives a Lexus he can't actually afford, and has always treated me like I was some kind of servant who married into his ex-family. He saw me and did this aggressive thing where he walked right up to me, got in my space, and asked what I thought I was doing serving his kids with eviction papers. I pointed out they're adults, not kids, and they're living in my house without paying rent. He said they're still his children, and I had no right to kick them out without talking to him first. I asked him why I would need his permission to evict people from my house. He said because they're his kids, and any decisions affecting them should go through him as their father. I told him he was welcome to let them move in with him then. He said his apartment only has 1 bedroom and that wasn't the point. The point was I was being unreasonable and punishing them for something that had nothing to do with them. I asked if he wanted me to play him the recordings. Just said it flat out. Asked if he wanted to hear his children talking about what a pathetic ATM I am. Asked if he wanted to hear them laugh about mocking me in the group chat he's part of. His expression changed. He looked at Molly. She shook her head slightly like she was telling him not to engage. But Harold's not smart enough to let things go. He said even if I had recordings, that didn't give me the right to kick out a 68-year-old injured woman with nowhere to go. He said Karen was disabled right now, and evicting her was basically elder abuse. That they could fight the eviction on those grounds and I'd look like a monster in court. That was a new angle I hadn't considered. Marcus hadn't mentioned disability as a defense against eviction. Harold saw my expression and smiled, like he'd scored a point. He said they weren't going anywhere, that they'd fight this, that I couldn't just throw them out because my feelings were hurt. Hannah jumped in then and said the eviction notices were probably illegal anyway because we hadn't given proper notice. She'd clearly been Googling tenant rights since getting served. Said that in situations where family members are living somewhere, courts usually require more than 30 days' notice. Said she'd already contacted a legal aid office and they told her she had rights. Ralph said his name was on the lease for the car that's parked in my driveway. Said that gave him residency rights that I couldn't just override. I pointed out the car is in his name, but it's registered to this address and insured under a policy I pay for, which means nothing. He said it meant he had legal standing to stay until we sorted out the divorce properly. They were regrouping. All of them. Coming up with arguments and defenses and strategies to fight back. This wasn't them breaking down and begging for forgiveness. This was them circling the wagons and preparing for battle. Molly said we should all sit down and discuss this rationally. That clearly there had been miscommunications and hurt feelings, but we were family and we could work through this. Harold said he agreed that everyone needed to calm down and approach this like adults. Karen said, please, just please, couldn't we all talk about this because she had nowhere else to go and didn't understand what she'd done wrong. And Hannah, my sweet stepdaughter who asked me to co-sign a loan 3 days ago, looked at me and said if I went through with this eviction, she'd make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really was. Said she'd tell everyone at her school, everyone in the family, everyone who'd listen that I threw out a disabled elderly woman and 2 young adults who'd done nothing wrong. Said she'd make me look like the villain in all this. That's when I went back to my office and came back with my laptop. Opened it right there in the living room, pulled up the folder with the recordings, asked if they wanted to hear them before they made any more threats. Asked if they wanted me to play the one where Hannah talked about how I almost cried when she called me dad. Or the one where Ralph said Harold thinks I'm hilarious. Or the one where Molly and Harold discussed their exit strategy. Nobody said anything. They all just stood there looking at the laptop. And then Molly said I couldn't use those, that they were illegal. I told her my lawyer disagreed. She said her lawyer would challenge them. I said good luck with that. Harold left shortly after that. Said this was between me and Molly and he was staying out of it. Ralph and Hannah went to Hannah's room upstairs. Karen went to the guest room, and Molly stood in the living room staring at me like she was trying to figure out her next move. She said this wasn't over, that she'd fight the divorce and the evictions, that she'd get her own lawyer and they'd contest everything, that I couldn't just destroy 8 years of marriage and throw her entire family out on the street. I told her to do whatever she needed to do, but they still had 30 days to find somewhere else to live, and after that, they were trespassing. It's been 3 days since Friday. They're all still here because legally they have until the end of their notice periods, but the atmosphere in this house is toxic. Nobody's speaking to me except to make threats or accusations. Molly's sleeping in the guest room with her mother. Ralph and Hannah are staying in Hannah's room. I'm in the master bedroom with the door locked. They've been having meetings without me. I can hear them through the vents, still planning their strategy. Harold came back yesterday, and they all talked for 2 hours about their options. Hannah found a lawyer through her school's legal aid who said they might be able to fight the evictions on several grounds. Molly talked to her lawyer friend who said the house thing was going to be complicated because of marital asset laws. Karen called some kind of elder advocacy group who said evicting her while she's injured could be challenged. They're not going down without a fight. And honestly, I'm glad, because I want this to be difficult for them. I want them to fight and lose. I want them to exhaust every option and still end up exactly where I'm putting them, which is out of my life and my house. But I'm not going to pretend this is easy. Living in this house with 4 people who hate me now is miserable. The silence, the stares, the way they whisper when I walk by. Hannah left a note on the kitchen counter yesterday asking how I sleep at night. Ralph keeps making comments about how I'm throwing them out during winter when housing is expensive and hard to find. Karen literally cried in front of me this morning and asked how I could do this to an old woman. And the hardest part? There's this tiny piece of me that almost feels bad. Almost. Because I'm not a monster, and I didn't want it to be like this. I wanted a family. A real one. And for 8 years, I thought I had it. Now I know I never did, and ending the illusion is somehow harder than discovering the truth was. But then I remember the recordings. Remember them calling me an ATM? Remember their plan to take my house? And that tiny piece of guilt disappears. Marcus says we're in good shape legally, says the recordings are solid evidence for the divorce, says the evictions should hold up despite their challenges because they don't have lease agreements or tenant rights, says we're looking at maybe 2 to 3 months before everything's finalized depending on how hard they fight. 2 to 3 months of living in this war zone. 2 to 3 months of them trying every angle to manipulate or threaten or guilt me into backing down. I can do 2 to 3 months. I've already done 3 months of pretending everything was fine while planning this. I can finish what I started. They think I'm going to crack. Think eventually I'll feel bad enough or tired enough to give in. But they still don't understand. I'm not the pathetic ATM anymore. I'm the guy who's been 3 steps ahead of them this entire time. And I'm going to see this through to the end, even if it's exhausting and miserable and harder than I thought it would be. Next update will probably be in a couple weeks once we're past the court date for them challenging the evictions. Marcus says that's going to be the real test of whether they have any legal standing. If we win that, they're out within 30 days. If we lose, this drags on longer and gets more complicated. Place your bets now on how this plays out because honestly, I have no idea anymore. Final update, it's done. They're gone. The last 3 weeks have been absolutely insane, and I want to remember every detail of how this played out. The court hearing happened 2 weeks ago on a Wednesday morning. Marcus told me to dress professionally and keep my mouth shut unless asked a direct question. We got there at 8:30 a.m. for a 9 a.m. hearing. Molly showed up with her lawyer Patricia, who looked expensive. Hannah and Ralph were there challenging their evictions. Karen had a lawyer from some elder advocacy nonprofit. So it was me and Marcus versus 4 other people and 3 lawyers. The judge was a woman in her early 60s who looked like she'd heard every sob story imaginable. She started with Karen's case first because of the disability angle. Karen's lawyer argued that evicting an injured 68-year-old woman constituted elder abuse and that Karen had established residency. He had medical documentation of her sprained ankle. Marcus countered that Karen was a guest who never paid rent, never had a lease, and was given 60 days notice exceeding legal requirements. He submitted the recordings as evidence, including the parts where Karen called me a fool and a mark and discussed taking me for money. The judge listened to about 3 minutes of the recordings. Karen went completely white. Her lawyer tried to argue the recordings shouldn't be admissible, but the judge shut that down immediately. Said recordings made in your own home when you're the subject of conversation are perfectly legal in this state. The judge asked Karen directly if she'd contributed any money toward rent or utilities. Karen said no, but that she'd been led to believe it was a family arrangement. The judge asked if she had any written agreement. Karen said no. The judge ruled the eviction was valid. Case dismissed. Next was Ralph and Hannah. Their lawyer argued they were family members living there 8 years and evicting them was cruel. Hannah's lawyer said she was a college student who needed stable housing. Ralph's lawyer said he'd been led to believe he could stay while establishing his career. Marcus played more recordings. The ones where they called me an ATM, where they mocked me for being emotional, where they discussed their group chat with Harold, where Ralph talked about how Harold thought it was hilarious, where Hannah said she'd called me dad just to manipulate me. Hannah started crying during playback. Ralph stared straight ahead with his jaw clenched. Their lawyers argued that young people say thoughtless things and it shouldn't result in homelessness. The judge asked if either paid rent. Both said no. Asked if they had leases. Both said no. She said legal adults living rent-free without lease agreements have no tenant protections regardless of family relationships. Evictions upheld. Molly's case was different because we're married. Patricia argued you can't evict your spouse from the marital home during divorce proceedings, that Molly had every right to stay until divorce was finalized. Marcus argued the house was my sole property from before marriage, that Molly never contributed to mortgage or property taxes, and that I had recordings of her planning to fraudulently claim half the house. He played the recording of Molly and Harold discussing their exit strategy, played the part where Molly called me stupid and desperate. The judge asked Molly if she had documentation proving she'd contributed financially to the home. Molly said she'd paid for groceries but didn't have receipts going back 8 years. The judge asked if her name was on the deed. Molly said no. The judge said that would be determined in divorce proceedings but didn't give Molly the right to remain in a house she didn't own when the owner wanted her out. Patricia tried to argue this was retaliatory. Marcus said it absolutely was, and I had every right to retaliate against people who'd spent 8 years using me. The judge agreed, gave Molly 30 days. They all lost. Every single challenge failed. The judge looked at them before we left and said people who treat family members like ATMs shouldn't be surprised when the ATM closes the account. Walking out of that courthouse was one of the best moments of my life. Molly tried to catch up with me in the parking lot, asking where she was supposed to go. I told her that wasn't my problem anymore. She said I was being cruel. I said she was right and kept walking. Their 30 days was up 3 days ago on a Monday. I'd arranged to change the locks at 8 a.m., hired a moving company to put whatever they hadn't moved into a storage unit in Molly's name, paid for 1 month. Sunday night before the deadline was chaos. Ralph had found a room for $600 a month, which was basically his entire paycheck. Hannah got a dorm room for the semester, but after that, she was on her own. Karen found a senior living facility but couldn't move in for another month, so she was staying with Molly temporarily. Molly had rented a 2-bedroom apartment for $1,800 a month, which was going to destroy her financially. She made about $4,000 a month, and after rent and utilities and car payment, she'd have almost nothing left. Sunday night around 10 p.m., Molly came to the master bedroom, asked if we could talk one last time. She looked exhausted, asked if there was anything she could say or do to change my mind. I asked her what she thought she could possibly say. She said she was sorry, that they all were, that if I gave them another chance they'd prove they appreciated me. I asked if she was actually sorry or just sorry she got caught. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Then she asked what I wanted from her. I told her I wanted her and her family out of my house and out of my life. She said she couldn't believe I was throwing away 8 years over words spoken in private. I said those words showed me what the 8 years actually were. She tried another approach, said Hannah was going to drop out because she couldn't afford tuition without my help, said Ralph was barely surviving, said her mother would end up in some terrible facility, said I was destroying 4 lives because my ego was bruised. I told her my ego wasn't bruised, it was gone, burned away by listening to them mock me for months. I said if their lives were destroyed, it was because they'd built them on using me, and that foundation was gone now. Then she said if I went through with this, she'd make sure I regretted it, that she'd tell everyone what kind of person I was, that she'd ruin my reputation, that she'd make my life as miserable as I was making hers. I laughed, asked her who exactly would believe her when I had recordings of everything they'd said, asked how she planned to ruin my reputation when she'd have to explain why her entire family got evicted from my house. She left, slammed the door. I heard her downstairs telling everyone to hurry up and finish packing. Monday morning at 6 a.m., I was up. By 7 a.m., they were making final trips to their cars. The locksmith showed up at 8 a.m. exactly as scheduled. Ralph tried to argue with him. The locksmith called me, and I came out and told Ralph he'd had 30 days to get his stuff out. Molly walked out at 8:15 a.m. with one last box. stood in the driveway looking at the house. Hannah was already gone. Ralph was sitting in his car waiting for his grandmother. Karen came out last using her crutches. She looked at me as she got in Ralph's car and asked how I could do this to them. I didn't answer, just watched them drive away. Watched Molly sit in her SUV staring at the house before she finally left. By 9 a.m., the locks were changed. By 2 p.m., I was alone in my house for the first time in 8 years. The silence was incredible. Ralph texted me 4 days later. Long message about how he'd realized they'd treated me badly, but that didn't justify destroying their lives. Said he was living in a terrible situation, barely able to afford food. Said Hannah was considering dropping out. Said their grandmother was depressed. Said it wasn't too late to fix things if I was willing to help. I blocked his number. Hannah tried Instagram. Sent DMs saying she was sorry, that she was young and stupid, that she didn't mean what she'd said. Said she was going to take a semester off because she couldn't afford tuition and housing both. Said if I ever cared about her, I'd help her finish college. I blocked her there too. Harold sent me a Facebook message saying I'd proven my point and maybe it was time to be the bigger person. Said his kids were struggling and didn't deserve to have their lives ruined over it. Said if I helped them, he'd make sure they apologized properly. I replied to that one. Told him his kids were adults and their struggles were their own responsibility. Told him they weren't my kids, never were. They made that very clear. Told him to lose my contact info. Then I blocked him too. So here's where things stand. Ralph is living in that terrible roommate situation, barely surviving. His car insurance lapsed and he got pulled over and got a ticket for driving uninsured. That's going to cost him at least $500 he doesn't have. Hannah dropped out 3 days ago. Couldn't afford tuition and couldn't balance working enough while being a full-time student. She's working retail now. That study abroad program in Spain? Not happening. Karen moved in with Molly, but it's not going well. They're driving each other crazy in that tiny apartment. And Molly? Molly's broke. Actually, financially struggling for the first time in 8 years. Working full-time with no money left after bills. Can't afford to help Hannah or Ralph. The comfortable life where I paid for everything? Gone. Meanwhile, I'm in my house that's quiet and peaceful and mine. No college tuition. No car insurance for kids who aren't mine. No medical bills for an ungrateful mother-in-law. Just me and my budget and my space. I've started working on the house, repainting, new furniture, turned Hannah's old room into a home gym, making this space completely mine. They wanted an ATM. I closed the account. They wanted to use me until they'd gotten everything, then throw me away. I threw them away first. They thought I was too stupid and desperate to figure out the truth. They were wrong. I'm 41 years old. I spent 8 years thinking I was building a family. Turns out I was just funding one while being mocked for it. Those 8 years are gone and I can't get them back. But I've got the rest of my life ahead of me, and it's going to be lived on my terms, in my house, with my money, surrounded by people who actually give a damn about me. The ATM is closed, permanently, and I've never felt better.